Hi, everyone. Okay, I know I'm the last person standing between you and snack time, so I'm gonna bang through this and we can have some food. I'm Zoe Brammer. I'm an associate at the Institute for Security and Technology. I work on all things digital security. My primary project right now is running ongoing lines of effort under the Ransomware Task Force. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. I'm very excited to walk you all through a map that I compiled of the ransomware payment ecosystem last fall, and to give everyone a sneak peek of a report that's coming out next week of a mini pilot I conducted mapping threat actor TTPs on top of that map. So let's get started. All right, so 2 years ago now, the Ransomware Task Force published its inaugural report. There were 48 recommendations as part of that report to try to mitigate the ransomware threat. A big pillar under those recommendations was really to disrupt the ransomware payment ecosystem. So one of my primary jobs working under that task force has been to further that effort. And when I started doing research about the ransomware payment ecosystem, I found that it was like there was no real comprehensive picture of all the players involved, all the processes involved. And so I set out to illuminate that ecosystem with the help of Ransomware Task Force members. And we started to build out this very sort of basic understanding of what happens after a ransomware attack occurs. I know this is really small, and normally I would blow it up a lot and talk through it, but in the interest of time, you can read the report, it's online, you can blow it up, there's a PDF. All right, so we started with just the basic kill chain and added as much detail as we possibly could. So we start on the left, with a ransomware attack, the red triangle. And then we have all the fiat transactions on-chaining where fiat currency is exchanged for crypto. Then we have a ransom payment. We have obfuscation in that very long rectangle. And then off-chaining cash out. Then I made it a circle, because why not, to indicate the cyclical nature of these attacks, and we started adding additional layers of analysis. So this first concentric circle of white tiles that you see here are types of information that are produced at each point along the kill chain. And the blue boxes that you see here are entities with the potential to achieve technical visibility into those pieces of information. So what we end up with is the kill chain, all the information produced along the way, and all of the people who might be able to gather that information. A couple of other things to note. The colors on the innermost circle are not random. The other ones are. That's my artistic license. Thank you. In the innermost circle, everything in green is regulated. Everything in yellow is under-regulated or under-resourced. You can't really see it here because it's so small. There are some dotted lines that indicate escrow. Otherwise, I think things are pretty, self-explanatory, but not at all. I know it's super overwhelming. Okay, so then I began on my mini pilot. We had this map. We have a much better understanding of what's going on in the ecosystem. It's obviously very overwhelming, so we started to try and figure out where to start, right? Where do we pick as a starting spot to add some disruption? So I worked with members of the Ransomware Task Force who provided me with data on threat actor behavior, some blockchain analytics folks, security researchers, incident responders, some publicly available data as well. Cleaned all that data so no one gets in any trouble. Thank you everyone for sharing it with me. And then I started to map the TTPs atop of the theoretical map that we'd created. Of note, I will just say the major difference between the theoretical map and the case maps is the introduction of a resourcing phase. So if you see on the bottom sort of right-hand quadrant that zoom in magnifying circle there, that's resourcing. That's become super important. I'm sure many of you already knew that. I did not. I'm learning. It's awesome. So I have 4 cases. I don't have time to go into a lot of detail about them, but if you can see, there are some red tiles that used to be blue that are now red. That indicates that threat actors are leveraging those entities in either building up the infrastructure to launch an attack, or in actually carrying out these attacks. So here are the 4 cases. And then I compiled all of the data into an aggregated mini pilot, as you can see here. Okay, resourcing is in that box on the bottom right. Everything else is the same. So this mini pilot I'm really excited about. I've learned a lot of things from it. I'm gonna talk to you about some of the major pieces that I'm pulling out. Opportunities for friction, great. Okay, so the obvious place I think to start, or the place that was most intuitive to me, is to begin with those under-regulated and under-resourced entities in the actual kill chain. So those are things like VASPs, which are virtual asset service providers, mixers, exchanges, especially high-risk exchanges, and darknet markets. Interestingly, most of these entities exist either in the on and off chaining processes or during obfuscation. This is to reorient the viewer. We're zooming in now on the resourcing phase. Okay. Resourcing, I'm super excited about this, and actually you might be able to read it, so that's pretty cool too. The resourcing phase, as I'm sure many of you know, is critical because it's the time in which actors regroup, reinvest in infrastructure, pay their affiliates. It's sort of the downtime in between attacks where a lot of things happen behind the scenes. And I want to just point out a couple of things about this piece in particular. So if you look on the bottom slightly to the left, you can see there's a slightly larger white box that says malicious attacker infrastructure information. There are a ton of nodes coming off of that box, meaning a lot of entities have visibility into different pieces of attacker infrastructure information. Those entities include, but are not limited to, domain registrars, cloud providers, and antivirus vendors. And those folks are often leveraged by threat actors in order to gain initial access, or they're sold that initial access by brokers, as you've heard from many other people today. Okay, the second really interesting piece to me about the resourcing phase is that it is very often the case that threat actors pay for that malicious attacker infrastructure using wallets from previous attacks. It's really hard to make a new wallet in the same way it's like pretty difficult to create a new bank account. It requires a lot of effort. So it's often the case that these actors reuse wallets. And because it's a cycle, what you can see is that that little blip on the right side in the middle, those are attacker wallets, and they are used to pay for a lot of the infrastructure that's built during the resourcing phase. And they are then also the wallets that ransom proceeds are paid into at the end of the day. So hypothetically, folks with access to threat actor wallet information, if they shared that information further along in the chain, there could be some opportunity there to identify attacks early on, like just after an attack happens instead of like much further down in the chain. Okay, another point I want to make is just a general point about information sharing. Nobody like beat me up in the parking lot afterward. I know it's such a trope at this point, but if you look at this graphic, there are so many blue entities, all of whom really see a tiny piece of a huge puzzle. And the more that all of these folks can be sharing information with one another, the clearer a picture we will have of not just individual attacks, but also kind of the threat in a larger sense. Okay, I think that's my last slide. Oh my gosh, a laser, sorry. Okay, the last point I'm gonna make, because I do have 40 seconds left, is just that I think in the same way that we really try to approach the mini pilot from the threat actor perspective, when we're looking at ways to introduce friction into the ecosystem, I think it's really important to think about which pieces of the ecosystem are going to cause the most disruption to actors and the least work for defenders, right? So that's like max, min, max. I think that's game theory. I don't know, I'm not that smart. But yeah, if we can do that and like leverage all these other pieces, I think that we can make a lot of progress. So thank you, everyone. It's snack time, I think.